Welcome to History 101, Lecture 5, The Middle Colonies. If you're following along in your textbook, it would be the OpenStax chapters 2, 3, and 4. If you're using the ushistory.org notes that I provided in Canvas, this section would be chapter 4. When we study British North America in the 17th century, we want to look at some maps to show us kind of the variety of experiences in British North America in the 1600s. This is the American colonies at the end of the 17th century or the end of the 1600s. The yellow area you have is colonial New England. The middle area, you see the middle colonies. This map separates the South into the Chesapeake region, Virginia and Maryland, and then the South, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. As you can see, Spain controls Florida, and the French control Canada, the Ohio River Valley, and into Louisiana. By 1700, we see where colonial Americans or English people, Europeans have settled. As you can see, by 1700, the purple area, you're kind of far inland. Notice how close to rivers and the ocean that settlements are. For example, in New York, you have a large Indian confederacy, the Iroquois, that control western New York. So you don't see New Yorkers. You don't see New Yorkers or Dutch New Yorkers go very far inland. Down here in the South, Virginia, you see the Powhatan Indian Confederacy, and that they're rather large. So you see colonists are pretty well kept to the coast in the rivers. And then we talked about the Carolinas down in that region. We talked about Massachusetts Bay and Plymouth Colony. This is a map kind of showing where Massachusetts Bay is, and then where the Plymouth Colony is as well. Ethnic and racial variety, as you can see, predominantly English. What do you notice about the backwoods? Scots, Irish, and German. When Scots, Irish, and German people came to the colonies, they tended to go to the backwoods, away from English settlements. So you can see where there's a large German, Scottish, and Scot-Irish population. They immediately go to the backwoods. They don't want to live with the English. African population, you can see where that's spread, concentrated. There is a free black population as well as slave population. So in one way, I don't like this map because it says African and enslaved, so it kind of gives you the impression every African American individual in British North America was on free labor, and that is not correct. So that's the only thing I don't like about this map, but it does show you where the largest concentration of African/African American or black individuals live. To kind of help you, one of the questions on the test might be to pick a section of the American colonies and discuss kind of how they're similar and different. So this table can help you. New England, more of a religious colony starting out. We talked about the Puritan Yankee thesis, where New England kind of goes from being a kind of a religious colony to being more secular from their point of view. They're still religious, but more secular from their point of view, and more interested in making money, an economic reason for their colony. Remember, by 1700, colonial New Englanders are shippers, shipbuilders, merchants, traders, right? Mixed colonies in the middle. In the middle, mixed. There's religious people, there's non-religious people, there's all kinds of different people in the colonies. And remember when we talked about Jamestown, the settling of Jamestown, these colonies are meant to be profitable. Georgia, the Carolinas, and Jamestown. You kind of see the different kind of groups, demographics and group. New England, their demographics much more one-to-one as far as men to women living in nuclear families. Where in the South you see an imbalance, right? A lot more men than women. Economy, farming, tobacco raising in the South, rice, indigo. What do you notice what do you notice is kind of not on this map, or sorry, this table? It's cotton. Cotton will be later on. That's the most famous product for the South, right? Cotton is king. Early on, 1600s, tobacco is the product we're going to see. Life expectancy in New England, they have the highest life expectancy. People in New England are regularly hitting 80. They're getting there pretty easily. Go look at Massachusetts death records or cemeteries. There are a lot of children, but as I've said in a previous class, when you look at life expectancy, if a child made it to 5, they were going to be an adult. So infant mortality is high. And then you get to adulthood, and we look at the life expectancy of older, colonial New Englanders live longer, 70s, 80s. People are hitting their 80s, which is pretty good for that time period. The middle colonies, we see a little bit less people living to their 60s and 70s, and in the South, if you add in the slave population, life expectancy, 50s is old, and so they're dying a lot more. Diseases, Indian wars, and then living, for African slaves or African American slaves, life expectancy is not terribly long, and so that's going to lower the kind of life expectancy of the region. So let's talk about some specific middle colonies. Here's a map kind of showing what the middle colonies are. New York, Pennsylvania, and then New Jersey, and then Delaware. What you can see from this map, 1685, there are 2 Jersey colonies, East and West Jersey, right? Delaware is there. And then New York, and like we've said, in New York, why isn't it going too far west? Because the Iroquois Confederacy is there. The Iroquois are strong enough to keep, militarily strong enough to keep European settlement all the way east to basically the Hudson River, and so that's interesting there. Different people in the middle colonies. The middle colonies, you see a large number of German, Scots, Irish, and Irish people that go to the colonies. When German, Scottish, Irish people come to the colonies, they tend to go to the middle colonies and then to the backwoods. So they don't go to New England. It's heavily English, heavily Congregationalist. Like Irish people are Catholic, so they're not welcome in colonial New England. Germans are Lutheran, which for Puritans, Congregationalists is the wrong flavor of Christian denomination, right? In the South, it's the Anglican Church, or Church of England, that's predominant, and so you can kind of see these different non-English groups, European, German, Scotch, Irish, and Scot-Irish. They're gonna gravitate toward the middle colonies, and then, like we said a minute ago, they're going to go to the backwoods. They don't want to, they don't want to live. They don't want to live with the English, so they're going to go to the backwoods. Right. Pennsylvania, the next colony we'll talk about. So Pennsylvania, we got to talk about a new religious group. We've gone over Catholics, Protestants. We've gone over Lutherans, Reformed theology, Calvinists. We've talked about Anglicans. We've talked about Puritans, which turned into Congregationalists. We've got to talk about a new religious group in England called the Quakers. Quakers were also known as the Society of Friends. Okay. They are a Protestant group. They're not Calvinists by theology. So they're not Calvinists by theology, so they're not going to be like Presbyterians or Puritans or Congregationalists. They're not going to be Anglican. They're not Catholic, obviously. So they're kind of, kind of Lutheran, kind of connected to that theology. They're going to be more Lutheran theology, closer to that, rather than Reformed theology, which is Calvinism. And so we got to talk about these Quakers. Some of Quakers' religious beliefs. Quakers believed that all are equal in God's eyes, meaning God created all of His children, and that God isn't like the Calvinist theology. God picks the elect, and God, punishes the wicked, and saves the righteous or the elect. In Quakerism or Society of Friends, you could say it's not completely correct, but you could say they're all elect. In other words, God wants to save everyone if He can. And so Quakers, all are equal in God's eyes. So they don't have the elect theology of Calvinism. They're pacifists. They don't believe in fighting war. They don't believe in paying taxes to support a state church. So Quakers, the Society of Friends, they're a new religion during the era. Puritans don't like them. So it's like, wait till when we get to Pennsylvania, I'll describe a Quaker church service for you and let you decide or let you figure out why Quakers, like Puritans don't like Quakers. Anglicans don't really like Quakers, right? The king doesn't like Quakers. They don't believe in paying taxes to support a state church or fight war, right? So that's going to be a problem. So enter a guy named William Penn. William Penn is a Catholic convert to Quakerism. His family's Catholic. His dad served in the British Army. He will convert to Quakerism, and he will seek a colony for his fellow Society of Friends. And he kind of uses his dad's connections with the military to get a colony, and he calls his colony a holy experiment. We're going to go to Pennsylvania, and we're going to live according to God's will. So kind of like the Puritans, we're going to have this holy experiment. We're Quakers. We're going to go to the New World. And we're going to have this religious society, an experiment on when when the holy community gets together. Okay. So Quakers go to settle Pennsylvania. So they're English, right? And then we've already said, so when you study Pennsylvania, right, you have English colonists, Quakers, and then you get German and Irish and Scots-Irish move to the backwoods of Pennsylvania, western Pennsylvania. You have Pennsylvania Dutch, which will become the Amish later on. They're going to move there. And so what does that tell you about Pennsylvania society? Pennsylvania society turns out to be, from our point of view, one of the more quote-unquote liberal, meaning open or broad colonies. Pretty much everyone's welcome. In the Pennsylvania Colonial Charter, they allow that they don't bar Catholics and Jews from living there. Everyone can come there and live. So that's why when you get Pennsylvania, you get so many different groups, right? English, Irish, Scots-Irish, German, Pennsylvania Dutch will become Amish. You have everyone going there. The colony of Pennsylvania did not have the death penalty, which is weird for that time period. Everyone executed criminals. So that's weird for that time period. Pennsylvania did not have debtors' prisons. They outlawed debtors' prisons. So that's a big deal. If you're poor and in debt, you can go to Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania generally gets along with their Native American tribes better than other places. So that's good if you want to survive. Don't want to go through military stuff. Pennsylvania society becomes kind of divided between Philadelphia English Philadelphia merchants and German and Scots Irish backwoods Western Pennsylvania farmers. So when we get into the 1700s and look at the political battles of the 1700s, the American Revolution, the ratification of the U.S. Constitution, Pennsylvania is an interesting case. You have this political battle between English Philadelphia merchants and backwoods farmers, German backwoods farmers. So that's interesting. The economy, and so that's another thing. You have the Eastern Philadelphia merchants, which are merchants and shipbuilders. Then you have backwoods farmers. So the Pennsylvania economy is kind of split too. And they're one colony, but you have kind of two very different sections. Whereas Massachusetts, pretty homogeneous, right? They're all English people. They're all Congregationalists. They're merchants. They're shipbuilders. Boston's the big city, right? In Pennsylvania, it's kind of split between English Philadelphia merchants and German backwoods farmers. So that's going to be an interesting battle. Like I said, they get along with their native tribes better. We'll talk about this more later, but I'll mention it here. Quakers are known as historians have crowned Quakers with the credit of being the kind of the first. I don't know if I've told you guys why I hate first, but kind of the first anti-slavery group in America. So Quakers tended to preach against slavery in this, back in the 1600s, 1700s. Now, the caveat to that is you can go to the primary documents, there are Quakers that own slaves, so, but in general, when you study Quaker ministers and Quaker churches, Quaker ministers tended to preach against African slavery and free labor. One last thing, tell you what a Quaker church is like, and I'll let you guess why Puritans didn't like it. So, a Quaker church, there's no minister. So I think that tells you the first problem Puritans had, right? Puritans have a minister. Or Congregationalists, right? No minister. You just kind of sat in the church, and whoever was moved upon by the Holy Spirit would do whatever. Wanted to sing, dance, preach. Children could do it. They had no problem with women doing it, which would bother Puritans. And this is going to blow your mind. There are primary document stories and examples of like Native Americans coming into Quaker church services, and being a part of it. So there are some examples of that as well. So I'll let you guess why Puritans don't like Quakers. They don't like their Quaker church service, right? No authority, the minister, right, to maintain order and theological, purity kind of thing. So that's Pennsylvania, very interesting colony. Next, we go to New York. Next, we'll go to New York. I think it's pretty famous story. New York used to be Dutch, New Netherlands, right? You had New York City, and then if you notice on your map here, all up and down the Hudson River, they have what's called patroonships. So patroonship is a land grant. So like the English would give land grants, a patroonship it's a land grant. It's kind of a mix of a land grant and kind of a feudal labor system. Like even by the 1600s, serfdom is disappearing in Western Europe, right? And so it's kind of during this time, these are land grants, but instead of advertising, it's advertising for people to come. You almost have like a feudal like land, like the lord of the manor, the labor, indentured servants. There is some slavery, African slavery. And So these patroon ships are kind of an interesting mix of the modern for the time period, 1600s modern, these land grants where you get people to come and live and settle, but a mix of kind of the old feudal system of having, unfree labor, European and African, work on these patroon ships. As you can see, they're kind of all up and down the Hudson River. The Iroquois Confederacy controls western New York, so you're not moving inland, okay, for a while. It'll be after the American Revolution. The Iroquois sided with the British. It's not really, popular culture doesn't really talk about it, but during the American Revolution, there are battles between Iroquois and colonial patriot troops, colonial soldiers, to fight for New York, and the Iroquois lose. And so before the Civil War, though, you're not going to live in Western New York. New York City is called New Amsterdam. How did it become English? The Dutch and the English go to war in the 1660s, and I kind of told you about that. Remember, during the last lecture, between the 1660s and the 1760s, England gets involved in several wars. Well, this is one of them. 1660, they get into war with the Dutch. The English win, and one of the prizes is they get New Amsterdam. They will rename it New York City, and there you have it. Interesting story how the English take New York. A couple of British ships show up in New York Harbor, and funny story where the Dutch guard, they notice these ships, and they're worried. They're like, oh no, English ships. What's kind of funny is a negotiation happens, several days of negotiating, and the Dutch kind of get encouraged, as long as you accept British rule, you can do whatever you want. You can trade, be merchants. So the English, the British government, these English ships, they kind of negotiate that, you're just English now. It's an English colony, and you Dutch, the Dutch aren't forcibly moved. You can stay there. You can be rich. Those patroon ships, that's fine. It's just you accept British rule, and so without firing a shot, the Dutch, New York City, New Amsterdam, surrenders because okay, well, and so it's kind of funny. They just kind of shipped over as long as we can keep being merchants and making money, have our land grants, whatever. So we talk about society a little bit and the economy. They're merchants and shipbuilders, and those patroon ships, they grow agricultural products, and then they float them down the Hudson River to New York City. So that's how we get New York. How do we get New Jersey and Delaware? So this is that region. You see New Netherlands in the blue, right? In the same war with the Dutch, the Dutch lose Jersey. The King of England at the time will give a land grant to the Duke of Jersey, just like the Duke of York from New York, his friends in Jersey, the Duke of Jersey, and he will rename it East and West Jersey. What's interesting about a lot of students don't know this. There is actually a Swedish colony in colonial America, New Sweden, 1638, the Philadelphia, modern-day Wilmington, Delaware area. That's usually a new one for students. And then the colony of Delaware is set up 1688. Delaware, if you look at the primary documents, it's Del, D-E-L, -A, -W-A-R-R-E, Delaware Indians. So Delaware Indians, so the colony gets named after that. There are 3 counties in Delaware, and they're combined into one colony. So there you have that, New Netherlands and New Sweden. Okay. So you can see the dates of the other colonies. So that rounds out lecture or test, right? Lecture 1, Native America. Lecture 2, the colonial South. Lecture 1, Native America. Lecture 2 is the rise of Europe. Lecture 3 is the Colonial South. 4 is Colonial New England, which we just got talking about in class. And then this is Lecture 5, the Middle Colonies. So it rounds out the British North American colonies, and it rounds out your first test. Have a good day.